You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you're well. The interview subject that I have coming up for you is Kragen Lum from the outfit Heathen. Kragen's also spent some time in Exodus, and indeed he still manages the band. Now, the catalyst for the chat, though, the reason for our conversation, is because Heathen have a new album out for 2020. It'll be released on the 18th of September. It's called Empire of the Blind, and I've got to say it's one of my favourite releases of the year thus far. Before we get to the chat, I'll let you know about a quarter of the way through or so I had to go and take care of something for my daughter because it was about, I don't know, by that stage it was about 6:30 or so in the morning, and she'd gotten up and wanted me to help her get some breakfast organised before she went to go to school. So that's it. You probably won't even notice it, but it is in there just in case you do, and that's the reason for it. So here he is. Without further delay, Kragen Lum from Heathen.
Well, should we talk Heathen?
I think we need to, because Empire of the Blind is fantastic. And look, when I had a chat to David, I said I thought it was a perfect marriage of melody and brutality. Okay, I've been a fan of your guitar playing for a fair while. I'm a musician and a guitarist myself. So the guitar
Awesome,
playing,
thanks.
look, the guitar playing is yet another gem in the heavy metal crown that you guys wear. So I just feel like all those things that we're talking about notwithstanding, I just think we're so blessed in 2020 because, whilst I love the 80s and as well, and the sort of music that came out of there, I just think we're spoilt for choice these days when it comes to killer guitar playing, more than any other point in history, to be honest with you. And for yourself, like a veteran who has spent so many years, I understand your history with Prototype and, you're helping out Exodus as well, and you've served a very long, I wouldn't call it an apprenticeship, but an internship. There you go. You know, but look, you're one of those guys that is a world-class guitarist, and you just needed an outlet. And with Exodus and Heathen, you're finally becoming a household name to genuine fans of hard rock and heavy metal. So for you personally, mate, you must be thrilled with how things have worked out for you, and especially the way that Empire of the Blind sounds.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for all the compliments. I really appreciate that. It's been a long time coming, in terms of getting this record done. I've been in the band for 13 years now. I think I'm the third longest running member behind Lee and David. So,
Hmm.
it's we put out the Evolution of Chaos album in 2010, and we did a lot of touring for it, but it never really took off. I think the way that we had hoped it would, and now that we're on Nuclear Blast and have what I think is probably a little bit better support system,
Yeah.
we're really hopeful that this new record can do something great because we all put a lot of work into it. I spent a year working on it, either writing and recording. It certainly came out great. I'm really happy with the way that it sounds, and everybody's performances are killer. So it's really we're kind of still in that waiting game. We have just a few weeks left before the record comes out, and we're just really hopeful that we can see it kind of get a little bit of recognition. This band has never had the recognition that it deserves, and I say that even from my sort of fan perspective, growing up listening to this band. So,
Great.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
it's
the band
go
was a
ahead.
bit of the band was like a curiosity there for a long time. See, I was always aware of Dave's involvement with Blind Illusion, and so I sort of followed the bands that came out of that band. I mean, people don't realize how many bands basically were motivated by the involvement of people in Blind Illusion, like Primus, for example, and you guys. And I, these are musicians' bands. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're a musician, you tend to
Yeah,
gravitate and want to investigate and find out these sort of music because it's real music. Like strip away the commercial incentive, okay, which of course has to be there, but it's still the motivation for crafting pure and unadulterated, just killer fucking music. It's there with you guys, and listening to this album here, and I have listened to it a fair bit. I got to say, I've even been drawn back to it. It's one of those albums with a lot of melody, but like I was saying in the intro, it's brutal at the same time, which I think it needs to be to sort of cut through and be to attract, say, the garden variety heavy metal fan in 2020. So look, I take it that a lot of the riffs that I'm listening to, they're yours. So how long have these been in the oven, so to speak? Have you been crafting a lot of these riffs over the past sort of 20, 30 years or so before they've seen a release on Empire of the Blind?
Well, I mean, I actually wrote all the music and all the lyrics for this record.
Gosh, yeah,
And
there you go.
it was written. I started writing the music in 2012 when we signed with Nuclear Blast, and I think I had about half of the album demoed with vocals and everything by 2014. And then, I kind of got pulled into the Exodus vortex and was touring heavily with them for their last record. And there really just wasn't that much time to to really focus on it. I was able to, have enough time in between tours to, maybe work on a song here or there, but there wasn't really time to just dig in and finish it. So, it did take a long time. There was one track from the original demos that was completely reworked, which is the title track actually. And it did take a long time to sort of, take shape. But I mean, part of that was just because I didn't have a lot of free time to work on it.
Yeah.
And, David and Lee both had, they have riffs and ideas and, all of that stuff, but they didn't have anything that was really fully ready to go. So, I know Lee still has riffs, and I actually have more music than what's on the record. But, we just kind of collectively made a decision as a group to go for it. Those guys liked what I presented to them, and everybody was ready to do a record. So we just went for it, and it's definitely my baby, so to speak. But I'm just happy that it came out so good. I mean that it sometimes you create something and it doesn't come out how you sort of envision it.
Yeah.
And this one definitely came out just how I hoped it would, really. And the same for all the other guys. I mean, everybody put in such a great performance, like I said, and really took things to the next level, and came in with ideas to add to the songs during the recording process. So it's really great. I'm really proud of it. I hope people can sort of see the magic in it. There's a lot of depth and layers to the album that you might not even hear the first time through. So
yeah, you're right on that point. You've got to listen to it with headphones on. This is not an album to put on through your iPhone speakers. You really, I mean, you can do that, sure. And God, I listen to plenty of music in the shower. So I've listened to this one here whilst I've been taking care of the kids and all the rest of it, in the day-to-day environment. But I tell you where it's gold is when you got the AirPods in, which I've got in now, and you can hear a little bit more of the nuances going on, and you tend to be drawn into a lot of the to the ear candy that you've done on this one here, and you can hear what you can hear. This makes sense now. You can hear decades of experience. Okay, and you know what I love about the album too? It makes so much sense now after what you said. It is a singular vision. This is your vision. This is the greatest of respect to the other members of the band, but it's got the kind of clarity and it's got the kind of cohesiveness. That's the word. It's got the kind of cohesiveness that only really comes when it's somebody's singular vision. Okay, and I was wondering about that because a lot of bands. This is not a diss on Faith No More, by the way, who are one of my favourite bands of all time, but particularly their last two albums, Album of the Year and Soul Invictus, didn't like them very much at all, because I understand they were basically just a hodgepodge of the different musicians in the band coming in and presenting their ideas, and Billy Gould basically going, well, I'll try and make the best of this. It doesn't sound cohesive, but what you've done here does sound extremely cohesive right the way through on all of the album's tracks. You can hear that there's a lot of variety of ideas. It's not about that there's not a variety of ideas, because there absolutely is, but you can hear that a slide rule has been run over them as a collective. So I do tend to think this is an album that, rather than be absorbed on a song by song basis, you need to listen to it collectively. You actually get the most out of it when you actually sit down, turn the lights off or what have you, and maybe go for a walk or a run. And you put the headphones in and you really absorb it that way. So, mate, look, congratulations on that front, because I mean it's a killer album.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean that was actually the intention. It was really to present an album like those classic albums that we grew up loving and wanting to listen to over and over again. That was my sort of idea from the beginning. There are too many albums that come out these days, and I still buy a lot of music. I buy stacks of CDs that I get on a regular basis, and I'm listening. And the thing that's sort of missing for me these days is it most albums sound like a collection of songs. They don't sound like an album in the sense that it's well thought out, and even the track order. For the Empire of the Blind album, I really wanted to have something where there was a beginning and an end and a roller coaster ride in between, just like you would normally have like on those classic records. And I mean, if I'm saying classic, I mean some of the things that the most highly revered albums of at least my generation are those. There's the three Metallica albums: Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All.
Yeah.
All of those, they did this. They more or less had the same idea of that vision of a beginning and an end, and then a variety of things throughout. But they all felt like they went together as an album. And there's the other beautiful thing about the thrash genre that I find has kind of gone astray a little bit is when this genre of music started, there were no rules, and bands did whatever came naturally to them. They didn't care about what tuning you were in. They didn't care about what type of song it was. They did everything and it came out and it felt natural. Nobody was forcing anything.
Yeah.
These days, it seems like there's there are a group of thrash fans that they only like it if it's in E tuning. They only like it if it's at a certain tempo, and they put a bunch of rules around everything. And to me, that's ruining what the genre was all about in the first place, or it's contrary to what the genre was. It was about fuck the rules. Yeah. And so, we did a lot of variety stuff, just like I think this band has always done. There's, fast stuff, there's heavy stuff, there's epic stuff, there's a ballad, there's an instrumental. And I think that kind of variety is really what made those old records that we loved listening to so great. They really did take you on a roller coaster ride, and they knew like when there was a ballad, you got to follow it up with something that's like going to hit you over the head, like wake up, and they really thought through, they thought through the album more because that was what the format was. And unfortunately these days it's more about a song, and getting on a Spotify playlist or something than it is about making a killer record, and an album listening record. So, that was the intention. I mean, I'm glad you sort of picked up on that. There are a lot of little details that I think people will discover with multiple listens. There are some musical themes that even run throughout the album, interspersed in different songs. It's not a concept album or anything. It's just sometimes those things just come out naturally and they work, to sort of tie the album together.
Great. what I was wondering too is the guitar and the amp setup that you did on the recording, because parts of it sound like it was recorded live, but I know how difficult that is to capture something that sounds as tight as what you've got. So, can you talk me through the guitars and the amp setup that you used and how you captured that vicious guitar sound you've got?
Yeah, so the amp that's used on the album is a Mesa Boogie Mark IV. It's an amp that I have had since that model of amp came out.
Mm-hmm.
And a buddy of mine has one as well from the same time period. And the one that I have, just it's one of those amps that just sounds special. It sounds a little bit better than all the other amps of the same, model or whatever.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you find one of those amps that just has something extra special about it. So, what I did is I mic'd up the amp, and I got the raw tone recorded, and then I sent a WAV file to a guy I know actually in Australia that makes Kemper profiles.
Okay.
And I was thinking to myself, well, it's worth trying. We'll see how close it gets. He sent me a profile back for my Kemper, and I plugged in and I recorded it, and I was blown away. He was literally able to capture every bit of the sound. I mean, one of the things that I thought for sure he was not going to be able to get was there's this sort of woofy sound that comes, it's like in the 250 hertz range or whatever it is. Whereas when you palm mute, it has that sound, right? I thought for sure there's no way that could be captured on the Kemper. Well, he did it. I recorded them side by side and they sound identical. So we ended up using the Kemper, but it's that same tone. And the reason why we ended up using the Kemper was if I wanted to go back later and revise something, which I did, I could easily just punch in a section, and it sounded exactly the same. Whereas if I had, if you use a microphone and you touch it in any way, or the barometric pressure is different, it seems, or anything else, there's this subtle difference in the tone that you can't ever, sort of match. And so from a creative perspective, this made it great to be able to go back in and make little changes and stuff. When I sent the guitar tracks to Zeus, the producer, I recorded the rhythm tracks and my guitar solos here at home. And when I sent them to Zeus, he thought I had mic'd up an amp. He was like, there's no way I would have thought this was a Kemper. Cool. So yeah. It was kind of a hybrid of technologies there that were just utilized well. I know a lot of people record with Kempers, and there are some bad sort of profiles, but in this particular case, like I said, you couldn't tell the difference between the amp tone and the Kemper tone. And actually, the last Exodus album was recorded with a Kemper profile of the tempo and the damped tone. Wow. So okay. It's totally like you would never know. There's sort of a negative connotation when you start talking about using digital amps, but for some people, but in this case, I think most people would never know that we did that. But that was it. That's how we did it. That's how we tracked basically everything. We just had a really we were fortunate to be able to capture an awesome tone, and then and still had that little bit of live room feel or something in it. You know what I mean? Even though it was a close mic'd amp, it's hard to capture that in the digital sort of setting.
Yeah, it's just Kempers are just another tool, so it depends on the expertise of the users. So you're an expert with these things in terms of crafting a guitar tone, so you're able to figure it out, and in that way, you're able to find somebody who could help you figure it out. Meaning the Aussie guy who could, help you create the profile there. And I look, I get up to 20 or 30 releases a week at the moment from bands, a bit like what you're saying, Zeus was saying. I can hear when it's when a an inexperienced user's gone to the Kemper and gone, I like that sound, and they haven't understood that you've really got to round out the tone and you've got to own the tone. It's got to be something that comes from within you. You can't sort of, when you're doing demos, it's a bit different. But I think when you're doing albums and you're playing live, I really think you've got to figure out your own tone, specific tone. But I think that also comes with decades of experience, which of course you've got. And look, I'm going to switch gears for a second and ask about the COVID thing. Because I think for seasoned veterans like yourself, I'm actually sensing there's more opportunity for creating content now for you. And the reason I say that is because you can't go out on the road, you can't promote an excellent release like this one here. But I know you've done a lot of videos because I've watched a fair few of them. And I know the guys in Suicide Silence have been doing their virtual world tour where they have different people from different territories come in at for an hour or two and watch them play live and then ask questions and do a bit of a back and forth sort of thing. So I guess, you've been doing this as long as anybody. So do you think that COVID will have such a detrimental effect on the live music industry that many bands won't recover? And it'll go back to something for heavy metal, that is, to what it was like in the 90s, where there was about 5 bands that could tour and the rest of the bands were sort of in hibernation? Or do you think that we're going to because until there's a vaccine, we're stuck effectively? Do you think that enterprising individuals such as yourself and Dave are going to put your heads together and you're just going to go, well, we've got an audience now, we're not going to lose it, we're just going to keep on creating content? And what do you think a lot of that content might look like?
Well, that's the question of the year for musicians right there. Is what's the musical landscape going to look like after COVID-19? It's, to be honest with you, it's impossible to tell. This industry and all of the sort of pieces of the machine, so to speak, there's a lot of them, and my concern is that it's going to be very, very difficult for not just the musicians but the crew, the clubs, the booking agencies. It's going to be very difficult for a lot of these people and companies to survive this, because this is, thinking about crew, for example, those guys work constantly, and it's been almost 6 months now of them not being able to work. And so, you've got to think that at some point people are going to start to panic. Like when we get to the end of this year and there's still no work, because I don't think anybody's going to tour this year. And I honestly am not sure. I'm not sure how many people are going to tour in the first half of next year either. So it's a hard question to ask. For me personally, I love playing live. I love interacting with the fans. I'm also a homebody. I love being home. I like working from home, and I do a lot of different things. So besides playing in the bands and recording and stuff like that, I manage Heathen, I manage Exodus, I manage a band called War Curse from Ohio. I help a lot of other bands with management type stuff and music publishing stuff. I do guitar books. I release them. I release digital music, so I do a lot of different things. So I will have no lack of things to keep me busy. Touring provides I would say, the vast majority of the income for most metal musicians these days. So people are going to have to get really, really creative with how they're doing things and what they're doing. I think we're starting to see that with some of the band merchandise. Bands are exploring doing other things that they hadn't done before, like puzzles and, like things that you wouldn't associate as band merch, you know what I mean? So I think that that's going to have to continue for people. I really don't know if it's going to fully recover. I mean, I can only think of it from my perspective of a guy who, like, next summer I turn 50.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I was growing up, 55 was retirement age. Now, these days, of course, that's not the case. It's more like 70. But how long are these guys that play thrash metal or death metal or whatever? How long are they going to go out and do it? I mean, I can't imagine, somebody doing something as challenging as like death metal drumming, for example, doing that into their 60s. You know what I mean? So it's I think a lot of bands are going to be forced to at least start thinking more long term, like future, like what's going to happen after not just after the next album, but what's going to happen in 10 years, or whatever, and start planning for that. I certainly am, branching out and doing a lot more types of stuff. It's been sort of almost overwhelming in terms of the amount of work to do. But I know that at some point, one of the facets of my musical livelihood is going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to replace it with something and still be, happy doing what I'm doing. So it's really hard to say. There's a part of me that wonders how many bands are going to survive. I think the big ones that have enough money to last them are going to be okay. The ones that have been making smart business moves over the years, and they really have their business together, they're going to be okay. The younger bands and anybody who's sort of middle aged and has families, it's going to be tough on them. I feel really bad for a lot of people. So hopefully it'll recover soon and bands can get back to doing, what they've been doing. But if the future looks different, we're all going to have to find ways to sort of adapt and survive, I think.
Yeah, you make so many great points in there, and one of them was that I didn't realise that you were Exodus's manager. Okay, so you shifted over and you're doing that role as well from just not just being a musician. So it sounds like you're set up, like you've got the business skills to survive what's actually going to happen here. But what with Exodus and performing in them is I mean, I take it Slayer's not going to come back; it's done. So is Gary coming back into the band? If things do get to the point where there's a vaccine and you can perform live again, will you guys do like the Iron Maiden setup, where you keep yourself?
No. He's back full time. I just basically slid over from playing on the stage with them to working behind the scenes. But I mean, I spent about 12 years of my life making video games for Activision. So I was a video game producer and have a lot of sort of business experience from that other career that I'm able to sort of pull in, and it helps me, when I'm reading contracts or negotiating, or any of that kind of stuff. Where typically those are the places where bands are vulnerable. We'll put it that way, because they're not, they may not be good at the business stuff. There are creative people that are amazing creative talent, but if you ask them to look at a contract, they would just rather sign it and live with whatever it is than learn to read it, so to speak. So anyway, I mean, he's back full time. They're actually going into the studio in little over a week. They're going to be starting on the new record, and I'll just be helping them in a different capacity.
Mate, you wear a lot of hats. God, you're a programmer, so you're a coder. Do you see that programming and coding? I always wanted to ask somebody this who's been in the biz. So there's this push these days to get And did you? I don't know whether I can't remember if that happened here in Australia or happened in the States, but they were talking about truckers becoming coders. Do you remember that with the automation of the trucking
No,
industry? And they were
I don't.
saying some person, maybe they had good intentions, maybe they were just being an asshole, but they came out and said, "Well, truckers just need to learn how to code." And I'm thinking, I've done a little bit of it,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
it's
Well,
not
I
my
mean, here's the
thing.
thing. Like, I'm good at business stuff, but I'm not a coder. I'm a producer. So I'm used to managing budgets and schedules, and for like when I was in the video game industry, and I worked on a couple of the Guitar Hero games, and
Mm,
007 and a
cool.
bunch of the Tony Hawk video games and stuff like that. So you're talking about, like, for a video game, it's like a multi-million-dollar budget, and you have a schedule and different teams of development, different development teams working on different parts of the project. And it's basically, my job was to manage all of it.
Mm,
So that's the part that I sort of bring over into the music business. In terms of programming, I mean, about as complicated as I get is, transcribing music and for guitar books. I have a background in musical education, and I use that also for different things. But um, I mean, I tried learning Java once, and I wasn't very successful. I think ultimately it was that I didn't really want to do it, though.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
more, if I want to do something, I'll learn it and I'll get proficient at it. But yeah, not everybody is capable of learning those other things. Somebody that drives a truck might be really good at driving a truck and might be creative too, but can't, balance a checkbook. So, and vice versa. There are people that are mathematically inclined, or programmers that have no creative, um, bone in their body, or
Hmm.
in their brain, I guess. So, I don't think everybody can just switch like that. It's going to be difficult when some, you know, the world is definitely changing into more of a digital world. And I think some people are going to have a really hard time adapting to that. People that, like, work with their hands, for example,
Yep.
and are, kinetic. That's that's not easy for somebody to make a switch and suddenly, learn how to do something else. So it's one of those things. Like, I still teach guitar lessons too, as another hat.
Oh,
But
cool. Yep.
one of the things that I found through teaching lessons is that not everyone learns the same way. And unfortunately, most teachers have a way that they teach, and they use that for all students, like they're all the same. But people learn differently. So some guy might learn by watching a YouTube video, and some guy might learn better by reading a tablature book, and somebody else might need you to, like, show them, or walk them through it. It's so everybody learns in a different way, and I don't know how it's going to be interesting to see how the world adapts. I wonder if, as education will change sort of to match, the new world, so to speak. How
Mm.
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Your children will be learning different things than we learned growing up. That's for sure.
Oh, it's crazy to see it, man. I mean, especially with COVID, most of their learning over the past 6 months has been via an iPad or a computer screen, and
Right.
they're already inclined to that anyway. So my eldest daughter in particular, I've banned the TV. I've got to say, I've banned the captive audience things. They're just sitting there and staring at a TV, cartoons or YouTube. If she's these days, mate, they're playing games with their friends 4 doors down, 4 blocks over. So
Yeah.
they're actually participating in it, and I've just graduated from university myself, so I've just completed an undergrad degree, and one of the subjects was digital media and society, and so we dived into a lot of this stuff because, of course, parents are extremely concerned about the amount of time that their kids are spending in front of screens. But the devil's in the detail there, and it's like I mentioned just then, it's if they're sitting there and they're absorbing information. Well, it's not even information; it's just content and there's no two-way interaction, that's extremely bad for them. But if they're participating and if they're using problem-solving skills and the like, well, that's where the opportunity actually is. So I don't actually have. I mean, she's not on it more than 2 hours a day. We put a cap on it that way, but weekends it might be a bit more. But we put a cap on it so as though we do take them across the road to the park and I kick the football around with them, or we play cricket or whatever it might be. We take them to the beach or something. But it's not going away anytime soon. I mean, this is here to stay. People are going to be using screens to get things done in a way that we can't even imagine in 10 years' time, even. So
Yeah.
I see that. I just think people too, and look, I've had to do it too. I've had to learn how to use the Adobe suite of products, Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Illustrator, and at first it was daunting, to be honest with you, because I'm 42 and I started learning this stuff when I was 40, and your initial feelings are, I don't want to do this because I'd much prefer to draw with my hands and be analog about it. But it takes a couple of months, but once you get into it, you find yourself looking forward to learning how to do new things and looking at the YouTube clips and the like, and it can become pretty consuming when you think about it, because the possibilities and the really are endless, especially if you find YouTube clips that sort of teach you how to do things that you didn't know how to do, and then you get motivated and inspired by that. So I've started to become a little bit of a filmmaker through Premiere Pro. And this is my point, is that I think if people are creating content and that they're creating things that are meaningful for people, you've just got to be smart about it and then work out how to monetize it, like what you guys do with the bands. So I think there's plenty of opportunities there for people, but there's a lot of people even that I know that I don't think want to participate in that world, that do want to stay analog and don't want to get digital. But unfortunately, you can't halt that type of progress. It's just impossible. It's a wave that's going to crash over you, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, for the new Heathen record, I've had to become a video editor. I mean, all the promotional videos that Nuclear Blast has been posting, with us as talking heads, so to speak, those have all been me editing them together from pieces of the music videos and video that I got from Dave or that I filmed myself of myself, you know what I mean? So it's crazy. I never thought when I was a teenager wanting to be a musician or rock star or whatever you want to call it. Back then you dream. Being a video editor was not on my to-do list. I wouldn't even have imagined that I would be editing videos for my band. So we have to create that content though, because essentially in the world we live in now, everything is so temporary, and it lasts about a week, and then you have to remind people by producing something else to just get them, just trigger them. Hey, don't forget about us. We know you just got 300 other new bands songs or whatever this week, but so yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing. Unfortunately, the music business is incredibly complicated. And for a musician to even just get paid for all of the various things, mostly on the publishing side, it's like it's almost impossible for most musicians to navigate. So even like having a YouTube channel. I mean, believe it or not, Heathen has had this YouTube channel for years, and because Google and YouTube changed the rules for monetization, it was monetized, and then the monetization went away, and now just as of yesterday, it's monetized again. It's also, the channel's also managed by the company that owns Nuclear Blast. So, like, how do we get paid for that? That's one of that in this new world when, these are the kind of things that we have to sort of figure out. So,
yes,
I have my own YouTube channel, but it's not anywhere close to monetized because the rules for YouTube monetization require you to have this massive number of hours per year of views. And for something that I do, that are shorter videos, it's really hard to get there. You basically have to have a whole bunch of 30-minute videos and get people to watch the whole thing so that it all adds up in terms of time. So, It's like sometimes the juice is not worth the squeeze with all the work that has to be put in for what amounts to a bunch of pennies for all the streaming. So really, ultimately, what I'm hoping is that governments can put together something similar to what we have for physical copies of the album sales, which is that we get what's called a mechanical royalty, where you get a set amount of money, which ends up being a few cents per song, per copy sold. And until they do something like that with digital, we're just going to be getting these partial pennies, and you're going to see more and more of the complaining that you saw probably a week or two ago when the head of Spotify basically was telling musicians to start cranking music out every 6 months.
Yep.
And and it's like you do the math on that, and I mean, one of the prototype songs, for example, on Spotify has 1.3 million streams. Okay, we're sort of a one-hit wonder. It's the only song that seems to have that many plays, but we'll take it. But when you add up the money from all of that over that time, it's and then you divide it between the record company and the band, and then the band either has to decide to split it between themselves or use it for some purpose. It's so small, and you would think like 1 million people listen to this. That should be worth a little bit more than 0.003 cents per stream. But that's something I think that if music creation is to really get back to being an art form, like I think it was for a while, I think it's really going to need to have something where the artists can make a living from it. Otherwise, they're just more or less, doing it on free time or putting out stuff that's just okay so they can go on tour. That's how I see a lot of albums these days, is bands crank something out. It's just okay. And it allows them to go out on tour, but it's not a masterpiece. It seems like people are not caring about making a masterpiece because they're like, well, it's not worth it. It's not worth all the extra effort to try and make a masterpiece because we're still not going to get paid for the streams or whatever it is.
I think you're right. Yeah, and look, I think, unfortunately, I think the Spotify CEO might be onto something there, because I think your generation are the last of the album generation in terms of, the problem is crafting an album like what you've done here with Empire of the Blind. It's an art form and it takes decades to build up the experience. Like you don't see great painters producing their best work early on. It happens after decades of them doing it. And it's the same thing here with what you've done with Empire of the Blind. And the problem these days is that the mechanism for getting music out there is via streaming, and that mechanism totally abhors albums and people being a captive audience to the one band for a longer period of time. It's about Spotify playlists, Apple Radio, I think they call it these days. I don't know what the equivalent of the Spotify
Apple Music, yeah.
is. Apple Music, and it forces people into having these short attention spans and to basically trusting that the algorithm is going to throw up songs that they want to listen to, and that's not going to be via albums. And in that way, I read and I watched watch the guy. I think it's a video that he put out there, the CEO of Spotify, his comments. And initially, of course, I thought like what any of us do who have a skin in this game and want to see bands create albums. I thought, fuck, you're an idiot, mate. But the more I thought about it, I thought, oh my God, he's right. Because, I mean, he's part of the problem. Yeah. But he is part,
yeah. Unfortunately, the major labels, and I'm talking about like Warner, Sony, Universal, those are sort of the big players, right? Unfortunately, they have bought up a lot of the, smaller labels, and those bigger labels are sort of funding Spotify. So Spotify, if you look at it on the surface, like from a financial perspective, they haven't made it a profit. Now they pay their CEOs and everything, and all the heads. They pay massive salaries to all these people, but the bands don't get a lot.
No,
and the way that they do the revenue sharing, if you're a popular artist and you're getting more streams, then you get a bigger share of the revenue, which is also not fair. I mean, honestly, everybody should get the same, right?
Correct.
Unless, unless they work out some kind of special deal with Spotify, which is what the major labels have basically done. They've worked out deals where they get a bigger share of the revenue, and in turn, they keep Spotify afloat. They could easily all band together and say, screw it, we're not sending you any more of our music. Yeah. And then Spotify would go right down the dumper, right? But they don't do that. And so, unfortunately, the artist is the one that gets the short end of the stick in all of this. And, sadly, I think that, that while I hate what the guy said and I hate the royalty rate, he's right about creating content more often. That's the world we live in right now. Like I was saying earlier, the short attention span, I mean, by the time next year rolls around and we're ready to tour for this album, people will be on to the next thing. So we're going to have to figure out, what are we going to do, to remind everybody about this. I'm already kind of thinking like, and Nuclear Blast is sort of starting to get on board with the idea of bands doing singles. And although it's strange, it may be the way of the future, where you, instead of spending all your time making an album, you're making a single, and then you can release something every couple months or whatever, or every quarter, and spread it out over time and give yourself more time to work on one song at a time instead of trying to do a full album. So sadly, it's like, it may be the end of the album format if that's the way things play out, but it's too early to tell.
Yeah, I think all great points, and I think you're right. And I think Nuclear Blast will have to get on board with what these hip hop and these urban labels are doing, which is that there will be a single every month, and the album format it's not going to go away overnight. But I think over the next sort of 2 decades or so, I think it will be one of those things that is basically a niche thing. It won't ever disappear completely because there will always be musicians with your experience around that want to create that experience for fans and fans that want that. But if the generation of kids that, like my kids' age, right up to about the 25-year-olds, they're digital natives, man. They're not that they're attuned to what's going on right now. And mate, unfortunately, I've got to wind things up because I've got to get these kids organised for school. But believe me, I could keep chatting about. I know things. It's a lot. I feel like we've just touched the surface, to be honest with you, because this is a topic that I've been wanting to talk to somebody about for a long time, man. So, but look, you're a smart guy. You've got your finger on the pulse. This is an outstanding album. You're an excellent guitarist. I think with what you're doing here with Dave, and now that I know that you got your hand in the management side of things, man, just keep on doing it, please. Whichever way, shape, or form you can create music and keep bands on the road, or keep bands sort of focused on creating content, man, it'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the plan.
No worries, mate. Well, really appreciate the chat. Thanks so much, man, and good luck with everything.
Hey, thank you very much. It was a great interview. Good talking with you.
Thanks, brother. No worries. Hopefully chat again.
Take care.
Okay,
bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and that was Kragen Lum from the outfits Heathen. And I suppose I'll still say it has something to do with Exodus, so yeah, let's just say Exodus as well. There you go. Thanks very much for listening.